Hey, welcome back. I'm the Book Guy, and today we're talking about The Last Contract of Isako, a new standalone novel by Fonda Lee. Now, many of you will know Fonda Lee from her Green Bone Saga, which is an urban fantasy series about a crime family battling for magical supremacy. And that's a fantastic series, one of my all-time favorites, so naturally, you might be hoping for more of that. But Last Contract is so very different. This is a case where an author stretches their creativity muscles and reminds us that they've got range. I think sometimes people can get mad when creatives experiment and do new things, instead of delivering the same product over and over again. But I love to see bands change their sounds, or artists try new styles, or writers try new genres. So if you go into this book expecting something a bit different, I think you'll have a good time. The Last Contract is a sci-fi novel that's part old western, part old samurai, a little cyberpunk, and a little bit corporate drama. Yeah, it's very much a few different genres blended together. It's about an old samurai woman, Isako, known as Quickblade, who is basically the HR department. She's responsible for firing people, if you know what I mean.
You're fired.
But the one thing that this book does have in common with the Green Bone Saga is that this is fundamentally a character drama. This is a deep, ponderous exploration of the old warrior at the end of her long, bloody career. It's often a slow story with sharp, sudden moments of profound violence. If that sounds interesting to you, let's go a little bit deeper. This will be a spoiler-free review looking objectively at strengths and weaknesses of this story. In fact, I'll even have a whole segment today on weaknesses, because ultimately, I want to help you decide if this is the right book for you. Let's begin. On a frozen planet in a brutal environment, humanity has set up the colony Aquilo. Resources are scarce, life is harsh, and everyone must pitch in to help the colony survive. In this desperate setting, unemployment means death. Isako is a contractor, a polite term that means enforcer or fixer. With her legendary blade and lightning-quick reflexes, she is responsible for letting people go when they become obsolete. But when Isako finds herself without an employer, she becomes the very thing she swore to destroy. An unemployed person wasting resources, a ronin. Yet Isako has one last job presented to her, a dangerous act of espionage with her former apprentice at the center of this grand mystery. This final job might just be the most important thing she ever does. I absolutely loved the world created here, and this book spent the exact right amount of time exploring it. You know how some books have a really great concept that's just never fully utilized? Or other books have great concepts and then never shut up about it? Well, this book really dives into the concepts and then moves on to tell an actual story too. It's perfect.
It was perfect.
So this city colony exists on a frozen planet. They've been slowly expanding for 500 years, and they've made a lot of progress, but resources are still scarce. There's also a lot of politics. People are very divided on what approach they should take. Some political parties say we should focus on expanding the city limits. Others say terraform the whole planet. Some say that we should look for salvation elsewhere, like on old Earth or other potential colonies. However, there are a few dangerous factions that have even more extreme takes. Elections are won or lost based on the popularity of each idea. The technology here is quite fascinating because it is an advanced sci-fi world with spaceships and supercomputers and robots, and yet guns are almost entirely banned. So our contractors use swords instead. That's why it has this weird cyberpunk samurai story feel. I want to highlight the robots I mentioned earlier. So the super wealthy in this world can essentially turn themselves into synthetic bodies to extend their lifespan. This concept was explored really well, including the psychological effects of being alive but without experiencing bodily functions, and the mental duress that causes. And yeah, this is how you do sci-fi. You explore the crap out of a cool concept. But the biggest feature in the book is the corporate world. So Aquilo is what you would call a corporatocracy, a form of government where corporate businesses hold the balance of power. So Fonda Lee actually worked as a corporate strategist before becoming a full-time author. She had a corporate background, like I do, although she was ranked significantly higher. The point is, she brought a realistic, deep understanding of the corporate world into this sci-fi setting. And I think a lesser author would have just mocked the corporate world, or just made it cartoonishly evil. But Fonda Lee depicts it with nuance. It's realistic enough to make me cringe and groan like, oh god, that's exactly what it's like. Ugh. So to survive in this corporate world, people have to be polite and ruthless, and smart enough to know when to be each one. The story juxtaposes the wealthy corporate world with the city's underbelly. Our contractors walk in both worlds, smiling for the photos while also stabbing people in the night on the streets. If that sounds like a theme, don't worry, we'll get to that. So this book is primarily a character story, and I just want to say upfront that I just love how Fonda Lee writes characters. It is a small cast of them, but I truly feel like I knew each character deeply. They're not just vague blobs, or not just tropes either. They felt like real people who I distinctly knew and understood. I didn't always like them, but I understood them, and I think that's the sign of good character writing. So the focus is very much on Isako herself, known as Quickblade. She's a grumpy, cynical warrior who has seen it all and is officially too old for this shit. Now, I don't know about you, but personally, this was the first time I've seen the grumpy old warrior trope to be a woman. I'm sure other examples exist, but I liked the fresh take. And her character also was more than just a gender subversion. Isako has this fascinating duality to her, where she walks among the elite of society and knows how to wear a polite corporate mask, while also blending in with the lower class and even the criminals. Though she's definitely more at home as the street fighter. There are times when she is heartless, and others where she's full of compassion. So Isako is this fascinating, layered anti-hero who I really sympathized with. And while all the characters were well written in my opinion, I'll just focus on two more. So Cobb is another contractor and former colleague of Isako. So he's also a grumpy old warrior, but where Isako is cynical, Cobb has just given up. He is tired of the violence and the death, and he's reached his limit. Something has happened to push this guy over the edge. And I love seeing these two teammates, both fiercely competent and grumpy, but with wildly different reactions to their brutal lifestyle. And the, not villain, but anti-villain of the story is probably Minto. So Minto is the corporate executive who is 107 years old and lives inside a synthetic body to extend her lifespan. Minto gives Isako the eponymous Last Contract. Minto is the embodiment of the corporate elite, and yet she's not a one-dimensional Disney villain either. She's a true anti-villain because sometimes she helps out, but for her own reasons. She's smart, and a lot of her ideas make a lot of sense. It's almost annoying to admit that I respected her. So most of this book is from Isako's perspective. However, there is a large portion in the later book where we switch to another protagonist, and I won't say who, but that passage featured, in my opinion, what was some of the most fascinating character work of all. So what actually happens here? Well, Isako's Last Contract is very much like a noir detective mystery. The company, Socon Gas Pro, has a spot opening up on their board of directors, something that only happens about twice a century. Isako needs to stop a rival, Uchi, from claiming this spot, so she's got to dig up dirt on this rising star of the corporate world. But there's a second mystery too. Isako's last apprentice, Martin, has gone missing. Now, people suspect that he's dead, and Isako wants to make sure he's okay since she's on her last contract and won't be around much longer. But Martin may have gotten involved in some shady stuff. And yet, there's a third mystery. The disaster of Field 93. A gas plant explosion that killed 129 workers. Great tragedy, but some things about the disaster don't quite line up. There shouldn't have even been that many people on location, and why was the apprentice Martin looking into it? In the midst of all these mystery plotlines are the quieter moments of reflection, as Isako seeks to understand the life she's lived on this barren rock, and whether there truly is hope for this colony. There's obviously a lot of layers to this story, but I appreciate that there is never a moment where the character looks directly at the camera and tells you that corporate capitalism is bad. The story instead trusts the reader to draw their own conclusions. Now, a major theme of the book is corporate control, the idea that life is sorted into a hierarchy, and those at the top hold all the power and make major decisions behind closed doors. This is a democracy that's not really. Another is the classism. So poor people who can't keep a job are expected to retire to save on resources. Meanwhile, the super rich can buy synthetic bodies and live for centuries. Now, in some ways, this theme was a little overt. Not because the writing shoved it in our face and preached, but because the sheer obviousness of it. The unfairness is clear to the characters too, and to the readers. And yet, that's kind of the point of this theme. After all, we all know about classist inequality, and it is obvious, and we all just sort of permit it. I know these days it probably feels like every second story has a theme of capitalism is bad. And I admit it can be a little repetitive for audiences to hear it so much, but I also believe that art will naturally reflect the time and place of its origin, and we are living in late-stage capitalism, where the uber-wealthy have infiltrated government, media, and law, and we're seeing a wider gap between the classes than ever before. If we're not going to talk about it now, then when? On a happier note, another major theme is motherhood. So Isako has a daughter who was raised by the state, because that's just what everyone does here. But she also trains other contractors like herself as apprentices. It explores the idea of motherhood, of giving of yourself infinitely without necessarily expecting anything in return. I also like the take on the warrior mother, dismissing the idea that nurturing is somehow a sign of weakness. One last theme is that everything ends. The inevitability of death is a major focus of The Last Contract of Isako. So how do we face death in the end? With courage and acceptance, or with despair? Do we fight, or do we fight by keeping it together? There's a few characters in this book who have different approaches to facing death. It could be profound in all of the best ways, almost Pratchettian at times. Now, everything I've listed so far has been extremely positive because I've really enjoyed all of these things, but I do want to highlight what I felt were a couple of weaker areas to the book. So again, while I enjoyed this book immensely, I think there were three things holding it back. The first is that the mystery plotlines were all slightly predictable. I've seen a few reviewers say this about the book, and that they saw the twist coming from miles away. And personally, I didn't, but that's because I love being surprised. So when I see a book has a mystery plotline, I just compartmentalize it in my brain and don't think about it, so I can get surprised, and that really works for me. But I still think the twists were great, even if they were a little bit obvious, so kind of a small blemish here. Second, I think the book needed more darkness and tragedy. This is a legitimate complaint, and not just because I'm a sick bastard. He's a sick man! The opening 3 chapters of this book were amazing, and I love the opening. It instantly confronts the darkness and brutality of this world. I was engrossed from page 1. Yet in many ways, the darkness peaked early on. There were a couple of times where it reached the same level, but none went further, in my opinion. And I think this is because the book didn't want to go full Machiavellian dystopia. A lot of the darker elements of this society are somewhat justifiable. After all, desperate times call for desperate measures. So it's not a story about the extreme darkness, but I still think it could have gone a little further, just because it felt like there was a strong promise of it at the start that didn't really come through by the end of it. And third, a few story threads lacked a resolution. Now, I fully agree that some stories can and should have ambiguous endings. Finishing the story with some uncertainty can leave a profound impact on the reader, keeping us thinking about it and wondering long after we put the book down. But in order for that to work, it needs to be clear that the ending is ambiguous on purpose. If it's not clearly on purpose, then it looks like the story just stops and risks feeling anticlimactic. I think this story looks as if it just stopped. It left a few things uncertain, and I'm honestly not sure why. Maybe this isn't really a standalone and Fonda Lee is waiting to see if it's popular enough to turn it into another trilogy, or maybe it was meant to be ambiguous and leave us thinking about certain themes. But I don't know for sure, and for that reason, there was a certain dissatisfaction with some of the plot lines. This is just my take, however, let me know if you had different thoughts on the ending. Just remember to spoiler tag any comments about the ending. This story has a strong female presence all the way through, as you've probably guessed. It is very 50-50 male and female. There's women in all walks of life, in leadership, warriors, and mothers. And I also like that the men were competent and well written too. The people here are a fascinating mix of race and culture. The colony has a very multicultural feel. There isn't really any racism, since they are all quite literally all in this together. Instead, the real prejudice is class. We see depictions of the law being twisted to punish the poor, while the rich are never held accountable. No war but class war. That said, there isn't really any LGBT in this book. I have heard some reviewers say that they think one of the women was actually a trans woman all along, but I didn't personally pick up on that in my read-through. There is also some rep for chronic illnesses and terminal illnesses as well, and dealing with a body that doesn't work for you anymore. There's depictions of aging and losing the vitality of youth, and some great takes on mental health and grief. As for the content warning, this is a pretty violent story, and yet at the same time, I wouldn't call it a gory story. Sorry. So there's some stabbing and slashing, but nothing really over the top. There is some brief sexual content, although it's not really smut so much as it is gritty realism, and there is some drug abuse. Not drug usage, drug abuse, because those are different. And the whole concept of synthetic bodies and people being turned into robots does have some elements of body horror, so trigger warning for that. Now the ultimate question, is the ending worth it? So in many ways, yes. The book is good all the way through, and I loved the twists, and I loved seeing Isako's character go through her full arc. I am still a little disappointed by some plotlines being unresolved, in my opinion. If a sequel ever came out for this book, I would read it on day one, although nothing's confirmed about that yet. Still, I'm really glad I tried this book. There are a lot of cool ideas in it that I still find myself thinking about it weeks after I finished reading. So I hope ultimately that it's helped you decide if it's a good book for you. Good luck and happy reading. Thanks for watching. If this video helped you out, please consider subscribing for more thorough book reviews like this one. You can also support my channel by buying my own books, The Immortal Investigations, an urban fantasy series with monsters, magic, and mystery. The fourth book, A Broken Bloodline, is coming out this month. You can also check out my online shop and my Patreon for other ways to support the channel. I'll see you next time, and I hope you enjoy a good book today. Bye!